That's good. Maybe. We're going to do the intro, so you know where you come from, why I'm here to talk about this tonight, and then I will probably go with the flow. I might starting the discussion of why it's beneficial. Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah.
Emma.
And sorry, you're sticking with what does good look like for me.
Okay, sorry, okay. I was like, was it? Sorry, Jeff. I started recording.
Well, no, sorry.
I'll disconnect the call.
Prodders, pokers, want of a better word.
What does good look like?
So I'm Melanie,
Yeah.
Aviva.
Yeah, I can stick with that.
Just in that I'm not HR, or so I've done a bit of research on what Aviva is doing.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you to expand on that, but I'm head of asset management on the DE&I committee for Aviva Investors, so trying just to show what we're doing and how it's looking and where we're aiming for and how do we trying to get it landed in the right way.
Yeah. We'll make sure that comes
Yeah.
out.
Okay. We'll say up close and personal. Okay.
But then not straight into it.
To make it real as well, because some feedback I'm having is quite difficult to come back. People are realising got great empathy around it.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
No doubt. There's a real preference. But I don't mind.
In another 7 years. It shows how everyone thrives for social interaction and really missed it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Ben's actually, we've got mutual colleague who joined Aviva a year ago. He's got children at the same school as a cousin of mine.
Right. Hello. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jackie Newstead, one of the real estate partners here at Hogan Lovells, and it's a delight to welcome you all. I'm pleased you're all sitting down here, because otherwise it could be a bit lonely up at the back. But no, thank you all very much indeed for coming. Hogan Lovells has been a supporter of real estate balance from its inception, and we've been very proud to be able to support a number of their events over the years. And we hope that this one will be an interesting and slightly different one on the subject of paternity. Slightly different angle for real estate balance, and very timely for us as Hogan Lovells, because we've just actually improved our own paternity policy, so it all fits in very nicely. I'm going to hand over to Sue in a moment, but I do have a couple of admin bits just to tell you. There's the usual, if the fire alarm goes, it will be real because we don't have any tests scheduled. The fire escapes are on either side here. You sort of go out, follow the arrows, down the stairs, out onto the viaduct is where we end up. The other thing is we are being recorded and we are being live streamed, although I'm not sure it's very live. We are the only person on the live stream at the moment. I was supposed to tell everyone on live stream to go on mute and turn their camera off until Q&A, but there's not much point. So afterwards, we've got some drinks and nibbles back down in the Pension Lounge where you came in. So I very much hope you will all stay and join us for a drink afterwards. And I am now going to hand over to Sue Brown, the MD of Real Estate Balance.
Thanks, Jackie. I think I probably know most of the people in the audience, but I'm Sue Brown. I'm the Managing Director of Real Estate Balance. Many thanks to Hogan Lovells for hosting this. Many thanks to all of our panelists tonight, and many thanks to Sam, who's standing there on the side because she doesn't want to sit down, it seems. But Sam McClary, who's the editor of EG, and very, very good friend to Real Estate Balance, is basically be moderating this evening. So enjoy it. And thanks, actually, the other thing I have to comment is we've probably got more men in the audience than normal, which I hope we would expect in relation to a discussion about paternity leave. Mike's a bit sort of concerned that other men didn't want to come, but I did say this is exactly as we intended it to be. But as I say, enjoy, and thanks very much, Sam.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. I think it's mildly hilarious that Sue asked the childless person to moderate a panel about what you do when you have children and how you look after them. But we'll see how I get on. But let's start with the important thing, which is meeting our wonderful 4 panelists here. And I'm going to ask, starting with Melanie, with everyone to just introduce themselves and tell us why you've chosen to sit in those chairs and share with us tonight. So Melanie, over to you.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick off. So Mel Collett, I'm head of asset management at Aviva Investors in the real assets team. I head up a team of around 100 people. And are in my role actively dealing with people who are wanting to take parental leave. So I'm in the chair. I'm reasonably new to Real Estate Balance. Aviva has been doing quite a lot in this space, and I think is quite a known front runner, if you like, really embracing this and making it more equal across the workforce. So here to share a few thoughts on where we're going on this journey.
Fantastic. Thank you. Michael.
Evening, everyone. I'm Mike Meadows. I'm Head of Planning and Public Affairs at British Land. I'm responsible for all of our planning activity throughout the UK and our government liaison. So an interesting job. And I've taken shared parental leave twice at British Land. I was a relatively early adopter back in 2019, and I came back from my second shared parental leave last month, so happy to try and share some insight. And as the only man on the panel, I've sat in the middle for symmetry and balance.
Thank you, Kirsty.
I'm Kirsty Wilman. I'm a director in the real estate investment team at Federated Hermes. I've got 3 children who are 10, 7 and 3, and for the second and third did shared parental leave with my husband. I'm also a director of real estate balance and non-exec director of real estate balance, so sitting in the chair from personal experience and also from the real estate balance perspective of how important this is in levelling the playing field.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martina.
My name is Martina Malone. I'm responsible for capital raising and Prologis globally. Prologis is the largest owner-operator on the logistics side. I run a team of 18, a diverse team of 18 of men and women in my team. Several of them have taken parental leave, and so this is really very dear to my heart. I have a son and a daughter, and it's all about equality. I want my daughter to have the same chances that my son has when they enter the workforce. My son is 17, my daughter is 15. So been in the real estate industry for 30 years and been one of very few women when I started out. It's a much more diverse place now, and we want to make sure that it's a even more diverse place when our children hopefully enter the workforce at some point.
Amen to that. Thank you. So before we get into the discussion, which I'll moderate for about 30 minutes or so, this is an open forum. This is for you guys to learn and interact. So please ask questions whenever you like. I was going to say you can use Slido, but I think there's few enough of us here to know that we'd figure out who it was who's being anonymous. So just put up a hand, yell at me, ask a question. Safe space. No such thing as a stupid question. Believe me, I've asked lots of them. Well, let's start with some of the facts, which are a little bit upsetting, aren't they? So 32% of fathers take, or less than, what have we got here? 32% of fathers take paternity leave, and the actual take up of shared parental leave, according to maternity action analysis, is 3.6%. That's nationally. I'm imagining in real estate, it's not even anywhere close to that. So, Michael, I want to start with you to ask why you decided to take it.
I think, so shared parental leave, right? I think there's a bit of this perception that it's a kind of perk or a bit of a bonus for dads. Actually, I think shared parental leave is just a kind of natural extension of flexible working. I guess the reason I took it, it gave our family choice, right? Choice about who looked after the kids and when. When my wife came back to work, fundamentally, I suppose I took it to spend time with my boys. And I think what that gave me was a real shared experience of what my wife had been doing for 11 months. So, the split that we chose that we thought was right for our family is my wife did 11 months and I did a month. We did that both times. That worked for us. So whilst it wasn't an even split, I have that shared experience. We both know what work pressures are like and being a working parent. But I had that time, and the month that I did on my own, right? So, Monday to Friday, me and the kids, with all the good and the bad. It's tough sometimes, right? People know. So yeah, I think the shared experience was really important. And actually, I think often we look at shared parental leave through the lens of work. And actually, I think it's probably just as important in terms of equality at home. We've certainly, Olivia and I have definitely benefited, as parents from sharing that.
Fantastic. Well, I want to come back in a minute to how your mates and how your colleagues reacted when you took shared parental leave. But you talked there about the experience at home, and Kirsty, I know that you were off at the same time. Yes. with your husband. What was that like for the home experience, and how does that work, I suppose?
So when he was off with me, so we already had my eldest, so we had 2 children.
So you knew how to do it.
And then 3. So he thought, I think he planned it thinking a few games of golf, hang out with my friends a bit, and it was probably a bit of a shock. It was, I think, a bit of an eye-opener to him because I'd done the first maternity leave on my own. And the reality is the first is the hardest because I don't know if this is the same for everyone. You don't know what you're doing. I didn't know what I was doing. So that was really hard. With the second, we did really share. So naturally, because, I was feeding the baby and I naturally ended up looking after the baby more, but it meant there were times when I could say, actually, I'm going to go and do something, and he was on his own with the kids. So he wasn't on his own in a concentrated way in the same way you were, Mike, but there were times he was on his own. But even just being in the house and understanding what actually happens, how sometimes it's awful, sometimes it's amazing, sometimes you're absolutely exhausted and you still need to get on with it, gave him a completely different understanding to what I was doing while I was at home. And actually, from my perspective, it meant that the guilt of, I bought this, I've had, my 3-year-old, I've just torn his world to pieces by bringing this new baby into it. But actually, he had enough attention during that period that it was an easier transition for him, which relieved me of a tiny sliver of my mum guilt.
And what gave him some dad guilt?
I'm not convinced. I'll check when I get home if you've got any.
And I'm really keen to see, because I guess we think, and I'm saying this from someone who doesn't have children, so I'm complete speculation, but we think that there's a reason that we're not seeing as many men take up shared parental leave because of the reaction from people that they'll work with, because of tradition, whatever it might be. What was for you, Mike, your personal experience of those interactions with people, and Kirsty, your partner's experience of that as well?
So there's 2 members of British Land's Equitable Committee. Equitable promotes gender equality in British Land. I'm going to start some stats, right? But I'm going to be in big trouble if I get these wrong. So the stats that you opened with, I thought were really interesting. So British Land launched its shared parental leave policy in 2017. So it's been going for 6 years. So it's quite mature as a policy. And I think we're keen, Laura, Jess, right? Keen to look at how we evolve it. But in 6 years, we've had 35 fathers, right? There's a bit of double counting. I've been twice at least, right? But so we've had 35 fathers, and the shared parental leave has varied from 2 weeks to 26 weeks. And we've seen this kind of increase in fathers taking 3+ months, say longer, and we've had 2 take the full 6, right? And this is the last stat, right? But so 2019 to 22, we had 56% of eligible fathers at British Land, right? Still, only just over half, so there's work to do, but compared to the 3.6%, we're doing okay. I guess the reason for saying all that is, I think shared parental leave and equal leave in British Land is pretty well established. So the kind of reaction I got from the business, from my team, from my peers in the development team, really supportive. And I think I'm in a really fortunate position that we have an equal leave policy with equal pay, and that's a policy that's matured so that I felt going, keeping in touch and coming back, was pretty easy for me. I was off for a month, right? Not off, I shouldn't say off. I come back, it's always, you come back from shared parental leave and people always say, how's your time off? Right? I think that happens more to dads than women when they come back from maternity.
Because you're just babysitting,
leave,
right?
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although you can't babysit your own kids. I'm often reminded. But yeah, a good experience. But and hopefully what British Land did 6 years ago is encouraged others in the industry to do that as well. Although it recognised that it's still not universal. And the stats that you open with suggest that everyone's experience isn't probably as kind of straightforward as mine.
Did you have a different experience from your male, maybe female as well, friends outside of work? Or did they get it as well?
I think generally. Some people still think you're a bit mad, actually, for swapping work for
different kind of work.
For different kind of work, right? For childcare, for kind of being at home, with your babies.
Kirsty, your husband, do you have any similar experiences with colleagues?
With my youngest son, my husband, so shared parental leave had just been brought in by law. So my husband was, I think, the first person at his company to take shared parental leave. He works for a very large international company. And he was the first person to take it just by coincidence of the timing. And he's very much their poster boy for shared parental leave because of that. And he took 3 months and added on a month of holiday at the end that had accrued. So he had 4 months off. I think the initial reaction from everyone was, what is this? What are you doing? God, you're so lucky you'll get so much time off work. And certainly that was the reaction from our friends of, I think there was a mixture of why. I've never been asked why I took maternity leave, which is quite interesting. Why are you doing it? And, amazing, you've got 4 months off work. The really interesting thing is he works in a team, in the sort of the larger team, it's about 30 people. And I reckon almost all of the men who've had children since have done shared parental leave. And it's almost like one person making it visible and acceptable has really quickly become people going, well, actually, and very varied timing, some a couple of weeks, some 6 months. But it's spread quite quickly within that team, and they all make it work, and they all, cover each other, and it's really lovely example of how it works. But I think only because it's visible.
Almost a brotherhood.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Martina, how does that sort of resonate with you? And you were talking in your intro about this real want for there to be equality and having to encourage more men to take up parental leave. Hearing these stories, does that fill you with hope, or do you think there's still a lot of work to do?
I think it's up to us managers to change the world a little bit, right? And what you're saying about role models is so extremely important. I mean, as I've said in my introduction, I run a diverse team, men and women. 3 men actually just had babies over the last few years. And whilst the women don't have a choice, you've just born a child, your body needs time to recover. So you have to take that time off. You don't really have a choice. Men do have the choice, right? And so it's up to me as a manager to really encourage them to take it. So Prologis gives 24 weeks full pay for women, and then for men, and actually same-sex marriage and also for adoption gives 12 weeks, right, full pay. And it's there for men to have, right? And they can have it in the first year of the baby's life. And so I really have to encourage the men in my team to take it. So 3 of them were entitled to take it. 1 of them took it immediately 3 months. The other one just split the time over the course of a year. And as a manager, I almost didn't know that he wasn't there certain days, right? So he just said, you know, I'm going to take 2 or 3 days here and then 2 or 3 days there. So from a business point of view, that worked well for him and it worked very well for me. I now have a guy in my team really pushing him, please do take that time, because you will look back on that time and that time will never come back. And whilst you might think that this is a very important time to build a career, which I totally understand, I think as long as the manager makes it very clear, I have your back, this is really important. And I need these senior men to be, like you said, role models, because once we have these role models, more junior men will step up and say, I can do that. Yeah. And I think in the Nordic countries, they are very much advanced. You know, men just take 3 months off and it's absolutely normal. Everybody does it. So I hope that we're going to be there in a
fantastic
few years' time.
How to normalize it, which Mel brings me to you, I suppose, and how are you, through the processes that Aviva is bringing in, trying to normalize the shared parental leave? You know, logistics is brilliant, we love logistics, but probably a human being is more important, isn't it? And spending time with them and developing our children is time well spent.
Yeah, I mean, before I kick off a bit about where Aviva is on the journey, just actually hearing thoughts today, and I didn't say at the beginning, but I have a 16-year-old son, and when I came back after a very short maternity leave, I felt like I had to elbow my way back into my role. So it's actually great to see, and I'm amazed at the pace at which men are very comfortable doing this. You know, genuinely, I don't see, you wouldn't have thought sometimes the real estate industry would be quite so quick to adapt to some of these things. But there is no question, the bigger question actually is the empathy they feel when they come back to work around how difficult that is sometimes to get back into the role, the confidence, the pace of change perhaps while they've been out of the office. So certainly as a manager, I'm finding that an area that, you know, the landing back is really important, both linked to the comfort, the career development, but also, you know, they get their feet under the table in a positive way. I mean, I know this isn't all about stats, but when you speak to the people in HR who are living and breathing this, they love talking stats. And I often on the stage saying this isn't all about stats, but I think it's quite important just to share a few to show the journey. So we were a year behind British Land, so we kicked this off in 2018 with 26-week full pay and 26-week unpaid, and that's across the full spectrum: birth, surrogacy, adoption. So since 2018, 2,500 people up to June last year have taken the scheme, of which nearly half, 1,227 men. So, you know, quite a sizable take up. If you look at the trend about sort of like the time, in 2018, paternity leave was circa 21 weeks as an average. And as at 2021, we're now at 24 weeks. So the paternity leave is going up, and actually the maternity leave, 2018 was 45 weeks, and in 2021, it's 43 weeks. So I think it's just important to show, you know, how this is panning out. There are 268 Aviva parents have now taken equal parental leave more than once, and that's including 131 men. So that's rolled out across UK, Canada, and Ireland. And as I said, we're now sort of focusing more on that landing, that career development, part-time working, and really until there's a societal change around it being the female who still is the lead in taking the time out of work, we're not going to see an equal take-up of benefits. So that's what we're looking at now.
Can we ever get to that point where it's not just, there's not the assumption, I suppose, that of course the woman will take full maternity leave. Do you think we can ever get to that point? What's the kind of language that we need to be using to encourage more of that?
Yeah, and I think that still seems a real stigma about part-time working. And I think, 90% of our part-time workers are female. So what we're trying to do is figure out, is there more of a sort of, I don't want to call it like a dating site, but it's like a site on which you can partner up and do a full-time role, but you share it. And I think if we can try and be a little bit more adaptable about encouraging that, people will get more out of the role, and I think that will broaden to being taken up more by female colleagues and male. But at the moment, 90%, I mean, it's fact that, men sort of seem to come back and then they're 5 days a week, or they're coming back into a full-time role, and it's still very much the female partner who has to be the flexible one.
Yeah.
But I think we do need to adapt our tools and also it being more acceptable that a man can be part-time. Yeah. We're still struggling with that.
Like you're nodding.
Yeah, I think there's something around, and we see the same thing in our business about part-time work. Actually, I think since 2017, when we launched the policy, of the women who've had 2 children, 75% of them are now part-time. Of the men who've had 2 children in that time, none of them are part-time. Right, I found that out today. I think then that's pretty telling, right? And I think a lot of this is around expectations. We've talked about, we're seeing take up of the policy increasing, men taking longer, but few taking 3+ months and 6 months. And I think there's something around expectations, both kind of personal and kind of corporate, that for a lot of women are starting at like 12 months. Maybe coming down. I think my wife would say that actually she felt, she would say it slightly tongue-in-cheek, but she's giving me a month of her mat leave. Right, it didn't really work like that. But there's that sort of that thing that it's kind of, 12, and actually, no, we're going to do it a bit differently, and I'm going to take 9 or 6 perhaps. I still think for fathers, it's like 0. Anything better than 0 is, because this isn't universal and not every company's doing that. Anything more than your statutory 2 weeks, is a bonus, is great. So a month's great. So I think that, and also about coming back actually around those expectations. And I think that goes to the point around as line managers. I think when women have babies, we expect them to be out of the office for 9 months at least, probably 12, and then also for there to be cover. Whereas for men, that cover is, probably still rare, right? That men feel like they can take 6 months and there is cover in place. That's more exceptional.
I think there's actually stats as well to back up that it's the greater than 9 months and the part-time that seems to be the differentiator. So I think until we're seeing perhaps paternity leave being more in that 9 months, it's going to be the female that comes back into the part-time. I think data is providing the fact that length of being out does have a factor on the coming back.
Yeah. Do we need more of a stick then to make that happen? Should it be required of both parents to have time off? Sorry, there we are, the non-parent. have time doing the other job, or is it more? Or do we need more carrots to encourage this?
I think it's really cultural, and I think there's 2 things. One is making it more acceptable for men to have time off culturally. So it's not a shock when a man says, "I want to take time off with my children." It's that's normal. I think also the perception that it damages career, I think we've got over that with women a bit because, we do take maternity leave. I think there is still a perception amongst men, or a fear, and I do think men are treated differently in this aspect of if a man takes shared parental leave, why are you doing it? You're damaging your career. And the reality is, like, we're all going to be working a long time. That up to 1 year, it doesn't matter. I'm getting away from that fear of, I'm not here, I've taken shared parental leave, that shows I'm not serious about my job. It shows I don't want that promotion. And those things shouldn't be related. Like, they just don't matter in the grand scheme of things. But until we see that cultural shift where it's okay, and it's just, we don't even raise an eyebrow at it, it's just normal, then we still keep coming back to the same position. And I have to say, I completely agree with what Mike said earlier. I did give my husband 3 months of my time, and that's exactly, and that is exactly how I thought of it at the time. And I hadn't actually, until you said that, hadn't thought of it in that way at all. But yeah, there was a negotiation, and he would have taken more, and I said no. That's, my minimum is 9 months. Thank you very much.
With the sort of the cultural shift, I'm interested. Well, you use the word empathy when men come back from having been on shared parental leave. There's this empathy, and I wonder if we really want to have that cultural shift, do we need to see more of our leaders in the industry? And let's face it, most of them are men still. Maybe they're too old, but more of our male leaders doing this. And does there need to be? So should Simon Carter be, I don't know, having another baby and then taking taking shared parental leave and showing, well, I'm the CEO, but I can do this, and it's okay. You don't.
Is that a genuine question? Should Simon have another baby?
But is that what we need? More of our male leaders leading by example?
Yeah, and I think for our senior leaders, male and female, I'd say this is okay. There's our very senior leadership. Yeah, maybe their kids are older. Actually, their opportunity to do this is possibly past. But for those men who are doing it in senior positions, to talk about it, right? Which I guess why I'm here. So yeah, I think to show the leadership, I want to come. That empathy point, I think is really interesting. One of the things that I get out of it that I didn't realise I would get out of it, when I came back, a woman in my team took mat leave, and actually both times I've come back from shared parental leave, she's gone on mat leave. I think as a kind of line manager, having taken time out to spend with my kids, has probably given me more empathy and made her more comfortable around doing that as well. So I think, yeah, it's the leadership and then sharing those experiences.
So I think where Aviva's got it right is they are partnering with an outside provider to provide 24/7 support for both a person coming back to work, but also support for the manager. And they've realised that talent retention, that landing back, that cultural shift isn't just, right, off you go, you're back. Come on, we need you to perform now. There's quite a lot of support required to do that really well. Yeah. And I think that's the cultural shift. You want it to go well, otherwise it's like a tick box. Yeah, and I think that's where we're still finding our feet a bit.
I'm keen to stick with this training. So I was chatting with someone a couple of days ago, and they talked about how a manager had maternity leave or paternity leave, shared parental leave training of how they manage someone who's going off on leave and coming back. How much of that are we seeing through real estate? How much more of that do we need? Martina, as a manager, would that be something that you would find massively helpful in both encouraging your men to take the shared parental leave, and if they come back and they're like Mel's colleague, I don't know what to do, would that be helpful to you?
I think it would be, and we probably don't do enough of that. It's just really the empathy that one has, just sort of feeling and seeing that someone's struggling or not sleeping or whatever. So I would certainly think that could help. But back to what we discussed before, I think this role modeling is so important. Mm-hmm. It's just seeing someone senior doing something that's okay. And I think we can also do a better job just promoting this, right? So we're thinking of putting on something like this within the company and having a few men and women participate, and just making sure that people within the company see that that's okay and they talk about their struggles. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy for the manager, and it's not easy for the person that's taking parental leave. And coming back is a tough one. We've all we've all done it and struggled through it, and it somehow works. But if you look at a career 35 years or 40 years, or however long we might be working, I mean, what's 6 months really, or what's a year? I mean, in the big scheme of things, I mean, I remember when I had my kids, I was just cruising for a while. I just didn't want to have much of a career. And then when they were older, then I said, I'm ready now. I can take on more responsibility. So it might not all happen when you're very young. Maybe you just have a step up a little bit further down the line. So.
And that role modeling, I suppose, that you talk about comes from you as well, from that experience of, you can take time, even in the old days when it was maternity leave, you can still have this amazing career when you come back, even if you take 12 months off. Life, as you say, doesn't stand still in the sort of time period of our working life.
And also if I think about my 2 children, my son is 17, my daughter is 15. Wonderful role model is my husband, right? He's very much involved with them. He's a stay-at-home dad, and I'm very happy that my son grows up with a father like that, and I'm very happy that my daughter grows up with a working mother, right? So it's very good for both genders to have parents who are sharing responsibilities in various ways, and they can both bear. And I'm just wondering what kind of a employee my son is going to be or my daughter is going to be. So we all have an opportunity here to create the society in which we want to live, right? And we are doing this here now, creating a real estate industry that's more welcoming and forthcoming for all of us.
Where do we think the tipping point comes when, I suppose, this isn't a conversation that we have to have because the next generation or the generation after is just, well, that's how life is. Whether it's taking time off to go travel or taking time off to grow children, whatever the term is. When does that tipping point come? Are we anywhere close to it, do you think?
No.
I don't know. I don't know if there's like a biology aspect to when we're talking about shared parental leave in particular that means that we will never get to that tipping point. I think the experience that we've all had through COVID, and I think everyone's reevaluated their life in some way, shape, or form. And I do think that the flexible working, hybrid working, taking time out to go and do something you love, even if that isn't having children, has become much more acceptable. I don't know that we'll ever reach a tipping point where we don't need to have this conversation, or we won't be having this conversation. But I do think we are on the up in terms of moving it forward quite significantly. But I do think it goes back to people doing it and realizing, and I don't think it's necessarily the people doing it realizing it's okay, but people doing it and everyone else realizing it's okay.
Yeah.
I think there's something in how we split the time. We split our shared parental leave 11-1 because it worked for us as a family. I don't think it's necessarily about getting everyone, so everyone splits everything 50-50, right? I think there's no one size fits all. It would be great to get the take up much higher, right? And fathers are having that shared experience. But what works is going to vary from family to family. I think dads are. Not only did I do 1 month, but I did the last month as well, right? Which is, we all know it's the easiest one. Dads do tend to take their leave towards the end. And actually probably just getting a bit more creative around how you use the policy. And we split ours, but do you do it jointly? Do you overlap? I think we're seeing more people do that in our business. So I think there's a bit of flexibility about how it's used, but certainly see the take up. And your point about your kids, one of the things my wife and I talked about was it's nice to be able to tell our sons that we both paused our career to spend time with them when they were babies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Before I carry on, I'm going to open up to the floor if anyone has any questions in the audience. Remember, safe space. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Laura from British Land. Our policy was introduced quite a number of years ago, and I think that could do with evolving. So I'd like to ask the panel what they think market leading is in terms of parental leave.
Now go all the way down the line.
Yeah, sure. I think actually one area where we need to evolve is the flexibility. So we're quite rigid about good examples around phasing it a few days here. How is it, well, how do you want to do it personally, but then also how does it work effectively for the business? So you feel you're embracing it both ways. We're very rigid. You have to sort of take it within, immediately, effectively. So I think that's something we need to evolve.
Can't get this wrong,
Yeah,
Laura,
please.
can I?
Everyone take notes.
I think the first, and I've talked about this a bit, but I think the first thing for us as a business is what are the barriers, right? Why is it 50%, not 100%? Why are there men still taking 2 weeks, right? When the kid take 26. I think there's something in that, how we cover that when it's shorter periods, that men not wanting to let the side down, I think, which is maybe why men are taking sort of shorter periods. It may just be that actually they decided that was the right fit for them as well. But also, to my point earlier, as line managers, when women go on mat leave, we expect that they're going to be off for a long time and that they're going to need cover. So when men go on shared parental leave, at least making that more available.
Thank you, Kirsty.
I think the policies matching, so maternity policy and shared parental leave being exactly the same, because both the man and the woman are parents, and the same for adoption and surrogacy and any type of leave where you're becoming a parent. If there are 2 parents, they should have the same. For me, that's the only way you level the playing field.
Yeah, I think we've done quite a lot of research when we introduced our policy, so I think it's pretty market from what I understand. And yeah, it's just about encouraging people to take it. I mean, most women do, not a lot of men, at least in our business.
We should ever enforce.
I'm not a big fan of mandating something. I think it's up to us managers to really encouraging, but also not to letting go, right? If I feel someone in my team is not taking it, I'm having these discussions. I wouldn't mandate, but I would very strongly encourage taking it. And there's a lot of ways you can take it. You don't have to take it in one go. You take every Friday off for the next year, right? And that gets you to where you need to be. And that's, you can still do the odd email here or there, but it gives you some more flexibility and it gives you time with your child and with your wife. I think happier employees do better work, right? And so if you have a little bit more of a balance, I think it makes you a better performing individual ultimately. So it can work for both sides. So again, I'm not one for mandating, but for strongly encouraging.
On the subject of what is the best look like for now? How for each of the businesses represented up here, do you publicly share what your parental leave is, or is that just if you're in BL, we'll tell you what it is. If you're in Prologis, we'll tell you this is what our scheme is. But should we be sharing among the whole of this industry so we can get it right for everyone and encourage through just showing off a little bit more and giving other people the tools that we've figured out?
I think so, but that's sort of why we're here. I think Aviva's very open. I think there is more openness in real estate. I think it's the broader workplace that's more closed. I think we've made a considerable leap forward, and that transparency and openness and adaptability is very much there.
Yeah, I'm looking at Laura and Jess actually. I think we do, don't we? Certainly we talk about it, and I think
Policy is available outside of our intranet.
yeah,
It's definitely available for all.
only to the extent that we talk about it in forums like this. But
Yeah.
yeah.
The shares are maternity policy.
No, just the blogs of experiences.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be a secret policy,
no.
right? It's meant to be.
Aviva's quite vocal about it.
It would be wonderful for that kind of information to be accessible widely.
maybe a task for real estate balance. So to gather them all together and showcase best practice. Any more questions from, look at this.
Hi, Katia Polidoro, TP Bennett Architect. This is fantastic to hear. We have a lot to do still. Listening to few of the male colleague, young male colleague that have taken the parental leave on. The main problem, and probably with the architects more with the wider estate industry, is the pay, because at the age where average age that people have children, usually women are behind in the pay, and so ultimately, the father tends to keep working because it's bigger income, and therefore, you know, the taking time off basically falls on the mothers. So you have mentioned some of the numbers related to your policy. Is there anybody that offer, you know, if there is a full pay for the same amount of time? Because that would make really a difference. It doesn't fix the whole problem, because there shouldn't be a problem, but that's a bigger issue, societal issue. So is any of you thinking to push that boundary so that there is an equal pay for the same amount of months for women and men? Do you know the figures? Or
So we're the same for them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned the 26
Yeah.
and equal, but you know, maybe, I don't know, open to everybody. The point is that until it's equal, you know, there is always that disparity, because ultimately, I agree, it's a cultural problem, but ultimately it's also an income issue.
So until we fix that gender pay gap,
Yes,
we won't
that's a
fix
big
this.
problem.
I think also they link to your question, you know, it was referenced earlier about pausing your career before then going again, so that you manage both the home life and the work life. I think that's quite a female approach. And I think we're pushing very hard on having more senior females, but actually, because they've invariably taken more than 9 months off, and they may well have had to come back and be part-time, they're either pressured too much to take that next move, and therefore they decide this isn't for them, or they do manage it. But that, I think, is a really important area to work, so that female returners to work after maternity of a longer period don't feel that they can't get that next opportunity at the right time, and that there's a bit more of a flexibility around that.
Thank you.
I'm going to go here, and then our first male question.
I'm happy to do a coaching. I'm self-employed. I don't have children. I'm not sure about all the detail, but I coach a lot of people from SMEs, and I'm just wondering whether this policy and helping and encouraging fathers to take parental leave, does that work for small, medium-sized enterprises, or what do you think the challenges might be for those companies who maybe 50 people, if that's it?
I mean, I think the financial challenge is greater for smaller companies who might not be able to offer equal maternity and shared parental leave. And I think going back to the point you made, Mike, about cover of, you know, if someone's off for 9 months or 12 months, it's worth finding someone on a contract, bringing them in, getting them up to speed. When someone's off short periods of time, it's harder to do that. A smaller company, that's harder for the people left behind to bear sometimes. Having said that, I do think there are ways to cope with it, and I think there are ways it can be done in most companies. I'm not going to say all, that seems too far.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi there, I'm Charlotte from Cobalt. My question was actually just picking up on what you spoke about earlier about women tend to come back after a longer period of time, and then perhaps their careers don't progress quite so well. Is there anything any of your organisations are doing around childcare costs? Because I think that's one of the biggest barriers for women coming back after maternity leave is because that time before they go to school is a hugely expensive and it's a massive barrier for women coming back to work.
It's very much on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, sitting here right now, I'm not exactly sure where it's got to, but for sure.
Yeah.
We do certainly one thing which has been quite impactful for us that I'm aware of, which is the workplace nursery scheme. This is actually a government scheme, effectively enables you to pay your childcare through salary sacrifice. So that is, I think, the business being smart about using the schemes that already exist actually works out for our nursery, because the NI, British Land Saves, goes back into the nursery as a top up for the nursery to spend on improving their facilities. So that can work quite well.
I also think the other thing I would say about that is that making it more acceptable for, you know, if I'm doing school drop off, then I can be at my desk at 9:45. My husband works literally down the road from where I am. He can also be at his desk at 9:45. Now, because of hybrid working, it's rare that we're both in London on the same day. I've still got a little one, so we have a nanny a few days a week. So at the moment, we don't do that. And we're looking to September when my youngest starts school and everything goes up in the air again. It needs to be as acceptable for it to be a man who does the drop off than a woman. And again, I think that's the game changer. And not for it to be, good job, Mike, you dropped your kids at school this morning. Just that it's normal.
That's a cultural thing, isn't it? I often leave work at the valley and I sort of see some of the young people, the eyes roll.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like, my job's about to start now.
But quite often when a man leaves early and says, I've got to go because I'm picking my kids up from school, the flip side being, well done, and good job on telling everyone you're doing it and setting the example. The woman sneaks out and the man gets applauded, which I'm on the fence, because the man doing it and setting the example is a good thing. But just as a mum who's running home and trying to do it under the radar, you can sometimes think, why doesn't anyone ever tell me well done to do the same thing?
Well done.
But I think,
thank you, Sam. I do actually really appreciate it.
but I think things have changed, right? I mean, my kids are older now, but when we were in primary school, I vividly remember there were more and more men picking up. You know, that has really changed. And I think in a place so expensive as London, it's just brutal. You just have to decide who's making more money and who's doing what, right? And so it's not necessarily always the man, right? So these things fortunately have changed quite dramatically. And so I'm quite hopeful that we'll, you know, move this forward and that we don't have to have this discussion in 20 years' time.
20 years' time. Our gentleman.
So yeah, I work in media. We're a small business. I think the lady touched on what I was thinking in terms of what the panel. What's your view in terms of how powerful it is in terms of attracting and retaining staff? Because, you know, small business, you all got fairly big pockets, I imagine. So you know, 12 weeks full pay and the 24/7 support you're offering is great, but that's competing with wage demand, salary increase, that kind of thing. So I suppose in terms of maybe getting it over the line with other people in our senior team, we might be thinking about how powerful it is in terms of retaining really good people and attracting people when they come to interview. What do they think about that kind of offer?
Yeah, no, we're probably representation of the deep pockets. So I think that's very fair. But a lot of this is cultural and embracing key talent and showing some flexibility. You know, I genuinely mean it. We were losing people because we were getting quite a lot of this wrong, and you can't. That's not money. That's cultural and talent development. So, you know, we have an online university. You know, just having accessibility to good articles, good coaching, online coaching. You know, some of these tools don't cost lots of money, but if they are being made available by senior leaders, I would feel, okay, I've got support to do this. And I think it's really that cultural, inclusive. I know the word role models come up quite a few times. Those are all really important. If you get that right in an organization, you link it to talent development. And some of those areas we don't have right. And you can't buy those.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that from a British Land perspective and my own personal experience as being one of the first men to take shared parental leave in BL. I think when your business invests in you in that way, gives you that flexibility and work-life balance, that does inspire some loyalty, I think.
Got room for one more question from the audience. Two more, look at that, I'll be nice. Two more, lady here and then our gentleman.
Melanie McClary from PCLP.
Oh.
I'd be interested to hear if you've looked at transition coming back into the workplace for those people who've taken an extended period of leave. You know, even if it's more than a couple of weeks, there's of course challenges that come with that, and of course the role of the line manager as well. So if there's any specific initiatives or support you put in place for that.
So we had a program where in the run up to maternity or any birth of a child, so it wasn't even necessarily you had to say you were going to take shared parental leave, it was the just going through that experience where we had effectively training for the person who was impacted and their line manager, and the line manager piece I think is the really important piece. And we also have access to coaching on return. I mean, I've had 3 children, and the first time coming back was a shock. What shocked me the most was the third time coming back, it was still a shock. And you think like at that point I would have learned, but you have these rose tinted glasses and then you come back and think, yeah, I remember it's quite hard. And I think what I found really helpful from my personal experience is being quite open about what I found difficult. There was, after my second, I came back and I remember sitting with my line manager at the time and being like, I know the answer to this question, but can you just like, I'm going to do this. That's right, isn't it? And I remember him saying, yes, why are you asking me? And I was like, just bear with me. And he was like, you know this stuff. And I was like, I just don't feel like I do at the moment. And having that openness and that support was the thing that helped me the most. But I've been really lucky with line managers. So I think having a program that supports the line managers to make sure they are doing the right thing is as important as supporting the returner.
Also, sorry, go on.
No, you.
I was just going to say you're probably a good example of actually the more males doing it, they help that landing back because they understand that's actually really tough. They're great role models.
Yeah, I think the empathy point and a couple of more structured things we do, keeping in touch days, kit days and split days. I don't share parental leave and touch days. I don't make these things up, right? But so that's and paid time before you come back from maternity or extended shared parental leave to start to kind of re-engage with your team and the business, and then up to 12 hours executive coaching for returners from maternity and shared parental leave, which just demonstrates that commitment from the business.
Do you think, sorry, do your companies use the financial argument at all? Because obviously most maternity policies are not more than 6 months full paid. And so if a man is not taking his 6 months full paid, then surely you're making yourself poor as a couple if the woman returns to work at 7, 8, 9 months. So do you think it's more effective if they say, well, you're actually foregoing income that you would not have as a couple?
Spoken like a true member of the real estate industry. straight to the money.
It's if we wanted to maximize income, we would have split 6-6, and we didn't, and I think that was to do with just that balance. And again, my wife only gave me a month, so so I couldn't take 6, but. I don't know if should businesses make that argument.
Would you take more again?
I'm not having any more kids. I don't know. I'd certainly think about it.
I suppose probing your question a bit further, is that part of the cultural problem as the man still doesn't feel they can take more? And I've got good few examples where it's 6 months.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't really feel that was a financial decision. I feel that was more, this is a real opportunity for them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the one stupid question in a minute. But before I do that, to give you a little bit of marinating time before we close up. The question to leave us all with, or the statement to leave us all with, is what everyone on the panel wants from everyone in this audience to do when they leave this room? We've talked a lot about the need for role models and advocacy. So what message do we want everybody here, and our lovely Julia, who's joined us online, to take away from today? So that's the proper question. The stupid question that the journalist always has to ask is it really culture that is stopping more men from taking paternity or shared parental leave, or is it fear because they know that it's probably really hard to do, and to your point, Mike, that their wives, partners might not give them the time anyway? You still have to answer it, even though it's a stupid question.
That's
It's for everyone.
I think it was an eye-opener for my husband, and I think that has been a game changer in terms of how we now parent. I think he has, and I mean my eldest is nearly 11, so he didn't have shared parental leave, but has since had a lot of time with him. You'll be relieved to know. But he has had a closer bond with the two he had more time off with at a younger age, and he has much more appreciation of actually how hard it can be. And he was off in months 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then went back to work when I was still off. And so that last piece where I was still, I keep saying off, and I do refer to it as off. But it's those rose-tinted glasses. And he had a much better appreciation of how hard it is. I do think, slightly unpopular opinion is, some men don't necessarily want to get that involved or see it as their role to get that involved. And I do think that's sort of a historic cultural thing. I think some men don't want to do it. Some women probably don't want to do it, but
Right.
Yeah, it is. It can be hard, right? Like a very quick anecdote, if I can. I'm conscious we're coming to the end, right? I think there's a bit of perception, you know, that on your shared parental leave, you're going to rent a farmhouse in kind of France or something, or, you know, you're going to have time to play golf. The reality, and one of my colleagues did take shared parental leave and did this great blog, but he was in France in pair of shorts with his kids and like glass of wine and stuff. And it can be like that. And I think, but it's definitely not all like that. Kind of day one of week 1 of my second shared parental leave, my son tested positive with strep A. He was fine. He had to have some antibiotics, but it was like really, really stressful. And I had to deal with that because my wife's at work. So I guess I come back to that. Yeah, it's hard sometimes, but it's also, I got to spend time with my kids that I wouldn't have got to spend with them. And the shared experience of doing that was really important. And actually, my wife when she went back to work, and not been in the office for 11 months, came back on like day 1, or like, you know, having to rush to get the train maybe to do just that. With the working parent side of it's hard too. And so I think, yeah, definitely don't regret it. Definitely would recommend it. There is a bit of fear because it's hard sometimes, but yeah, I think you've got to embrace it.
Thank you. Okay, so now for the serious takeaway for everyone. It's you've come here, you've come and listened to some great things, we've had some great questions, but now the homework. What does everyone need to do when they leave this room? Mel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've shared a few areas where we're seeing challenges. I just encourage you to be really on top of what those challenges and live experiences, watch people coming back and how they evolve, but then how do you influence that going in a better direction? And I think sometimes corporates are policy tick, people are embracing it tick, but actually, you know, leadership and that cultural, just be ahead of what, even if it's not a personal experience within where you work, what the industry is facing, you know, read up and just make sure that you push your firm to embrace some of the challenges.
Fantastic. Thank you. Martina.
I would just say, let's take the opportunity to create the society we all want to live in and encourage men to take paternity leave, right? So that we get away from this bias against, you know, women getting pregnant, not being promoted, and so on and so forth. If everybody takes parental leave or maternity leave, then there should be equality. So we have an opportunity to change our real estate world, but we all need to play a part in it.
Thank you, Kirsty.
I think reframing the thought process. So instead of thinking, why are you taking shared parental leave as a man? Why aren't you taking that opportunity?
Fantastic, thank you. Final word, Mike.
Yeah, I actually in the same vein, right? I think encourage your teams, and particularly the men in your teams, to think of shared parental leave as a part of their career and not a break from it or a threat to it. In the nearly 19 years that I've been doing this, when I've taken shared parental leave, that's the longest I've ever been out of the office, right? And it didn't do my career any harm. Actually gives you a bit of perspective. I think it can be a real positive for your career.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I think there's some really great takeaways there, and now the onus is on everyone in the audience to share that out and not just keep it in this room. But for now, let's say a huge thank you to our wonderful panel. Round of applause, there we go. Of course, Hogan Lovells for hosting us, and the wonderful Sue Brown and Real Estate Balance for making the conversation happen. I believe there are drinks and nibbles and networking.
Downstairs.
Downstairs, what's better than that? Fantastic, thank you ever so much, everyone. Should I hang this up?
Really interesting discussion, huh?